What could have possibly happened to Nancy Guthrie, the mother of the Today Show host Susanna Guthrie?
The pie!
It's brought by Savannah's mom.
Savannah! I'm going to try your... Are you kidding me?
These types of crimes occur for at least one of these 4 reasons. In forensic psychology, we call it the 4 L's. Love, lust, lucre, and loathing. In other words, crimes are often driven by personal relationships, sexual drive, financial gain, or hatred. So when we're trying to isolate a reason in a perpetrator of why this occurred, we need to look at those 4 L's. The whole idea is that people just don't go around randomly committing a well thought out crime. So what we're going to do is go through each of these types of possibilities of crime that may have occurred to Nancy Guthrie to figure out what may have actually occurred in this situation.
At the end of the news conference, the sheriff added that it is still possible there was no abduction and Guthrie's disappearance is something else entirely.
First is a kiddie crime, which is usually characterized by someone who is very inexperienced and they're just committing the crime for just the thrill of it. A typical type of kiddie crime is stealing a car and joyriding in it, or burglarizing a home for just the thrill of it. Kidnapping someone, especially an elderly lady, is not very typical of a kiddie crime. So we can pretty much rule that one out. Another possibility is kidnapping for some kind of trafficking, whether it's organ trafficking or sex trafficking. That's a possibility. However, very unlikely. Nancy Guthrie, especially given her age, she's 84 years old, doesn't fit that type of victimology. The next one, kidnapped and possibly murdered for Epstein revenge.
What does justice look like to you now?
Justice now is holding accountable the perpetrators that helped him and participated with him.
However, this one is quite far-fetched because she's not the only one that was interviewing anybody. However, if this was that type of crime, you would see someone claiming that this was the reason, where they may send an anonymous letter to the family and say, this is what you get for interviewing Epstein victims and, Epstein is innocent and all this other stuff. So this disappearance of Nancy Guthrie doesn't appear to be directly Epstein related. Some people say it's a burglary gone wrong. However, that seems unlikely. It doesn't appear that any objects of physical value were taken from her house. Also, very rarely does a burglar become a kidnapper. Is it possible they shot and then now they're trying to hide the body? But if they shot in the home or knifed at all in the home, you would see significant blood spatter inside the home. Yes, there's some small blood droplets outside the front door, but nothing really inside of what we know of.
Nancy Guthrie has lived in this sprawling Tucson ranch home for more than 50 years. She and her husband, Charles Guthrie, moved the family in shortly after their return to the U.S. from Australia, where he was a mining engineer.
We were always close. After Savannah's dad died, the kids and us, we just gravitated toward one another. Don't you think?
I agree 100%.
Maybe she's a runaway. She met someone on OurTime.com and wants to live the rest of her life with that person, free of everyone else. However, the problem is that there's no indication of any of that. Also, given the fact that there was her blood outside the front door, indicates that there was likely, sadly, something nefarious that had happened to her.
Nancy Guthrie was a 46-year-old widow. Her college-age daughters made a pact to be home with their mom on weekends while going to school. Annie has made several appearances on the Today Show with sister Savannah. Their brother Cameron Guthrie is a retired F-16 pilot. Savannah and the Guthrie family celebrated his last military flight in 2018. He is the pride of our family and one of the country's finest.
The next one, getting lost due to dementia. This is sometimes common with the onset of dementia, where they may just leave their house and not really know where they are and just continue to wander the neighborhood or even the whole town. When I heard that she was 84 years old, living alone, that was the first thing that came to my mind. However, there's no indication that she has dementia. Also, this type of behavior, or any type of behavior like this, is not apparently common with her at all. Additionally, by now, they had helicopters, drones, and police everywhere. Her pictures everywhere on every billboard. She would have been found and located by now if it was something like that. As you can see, it's looking more and more nefarious. Maybe she's hidden or hiding in or around her property. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed with how the sheriff is investigating this crime. He's making some pretty big errors.
Monday morning quarterback, I probably would have, but I'll say this. We processed the scene. We got what we thought was complete. My team did that.
One huge error, I think, is just really inexcusable and confusing how you can make such a huge error is investigating the house for like 1 or 2 days and just handing over the house after that to the family. By doing that, they're blatantly contaminating the crime scene. Typically, in these types of crimes, the crime scene is taped off and sealed for at least a week, sometimes even a month or more. But handing back over the house after just 2 days of looking at it to the family, all of who could possibly be perpetrators in this crime, is just ridiculous. And that's even before the FBI got involved. The thing is that you don't know what you don't know, and that's the part of criminal investigation that I think a lot of novice make the mistake of, because the sheriff surely thought in his mind, oh, well, we did our investigation, we looked everywhere we needed to look, we got all the evidence we needed to get, and that's about it. You know, I don't think there's anything more. Because what happens when you begin to work the case? Yes, you come up with different ideas you didn't have before you started to work the case. It's that classical, well, you don't know what you don't know because you haven't done it yet. And as soon as you start to do it, you start to know more things and need to investigate more things. Did they look in every attic? Did they look in every crawl space? Did they look in every shed and underneath every shed and any other possibility where someone could be? Although now the FBI is involved and they apparently went through the house. So I feel a little more confident that they did a more thorough job. So as of now, I think we could pretty safely say she's not on the property or around the property. As you probably noticed, we're running out of options of where she could be and what could have happened to her. Now we're basically down to the final 2 options of what sadly could have happened to Nancy Guthrie. So you have kidnap ransom and kidnap murder. One or the other, I think, at this point.
Her doorbell camera disconnected at 1:47 a.m. Another camera's software detected movement at 2:12 a.m. and her pacemaker monitoring application disconnected at 2:28 a.m. Officials say the cameras at her home did not send video to local or cloud storage, so there's no way to see what happened.
So now let's review the possibility of kidnap murder. Let's be real. Someone is not going to deliberately go into someone's house that they don't know to kidnap and murder them. So when we're looking at this, we need to think, why would someone possibly want to kidnap and murder Nancy Guthrie? What's the motive? Why would they want to do that? That type of crime is typically done by someone they know who has a strong benefit in doing that. Remember those 4 L's now: love, lust, lucre, and loathe. Logically, we can probably rule out lust because there's no indication that 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie had any love interests. It's lucre and loathe. Basically money and hatred. A big question that investigators are probably asking is, who hates Nancy Guthrie? Who doesn't like her? Who wants to see her gone? She's an 84-year-old lady who basically just goes to church. I mean, it doesn't seem like anyone specifically loathes her to do something like that. Yeah, sure, not everyone likes everybody, but to actually go to this extent, it doesn't appear that there's anyone, at least that we know of, that would do that. Therefore, the biggest blaring L of all the L's for Nancy here, of why someone would kidnap and murder her, is lucre. Money. She has a nice house. She might have some net worth. She may have a life insurance policy. It's important for law enforcement to identify who are the beneficiaries of her property, who are the beneficiaries of her life insurance policy. Additionally, who's in desperate need for money. And this is not saying that whoever's in desperate need for money and who is, a beneficiary in her life insurance policy automatically did it. That's not what this is. It's just to look a little bit closer on that person to see if maybe things seem to point that way. A little bit earlier, it was discussed that one specific family member may have been a top suspect. I'm not going to name names because it's not fair to them, but it's natural for law enforcement to maybe focus on someone like that early on in the investigation. However, nowadays with cell phones and cameras everywhere and vehicle tracking with GPS, it's kind of difficult to get away with something like that. So nowadays, it's actually quite easy to validate an alibi. So therefore, as you can gather, yeah, we're kind of starting to eliminate that possibility. Currently, there doesn't appear to be a clear person that could have done this.
And I want to be very clear. At this time, we have not identified a suspect or a person of interest in this case.
So now basically the only other option is kidnap ransom. The good news, if there is any kind of good news in any of this, is that she could still be alive. Kidnap ransom in the United States is so tiny. It's so small. In maybe Mexico or maybe some other foreign countries, it's more prevalent. In the United States, it's so rare. But here's the thing. Initially, it didn't look like a kidnap ransom at all, and I'm still not even 100% convinced that it is, but is starting to look like there's a good likelihood that it could be.
The FBI says agents are proceeding as if these ransom messages emailed to television stations in Arizona are legitimate.
Typically in these types of cases, the ransom note comes quite quickly to the family, directly to the family, not to media outlets.
We received an email at TMZ from somebody purporting to basically issue a ransom demand. They are asking for money, a lot. They are asking for it in the form of Bitcoin, and they are putting an or else on this.
Right.
The reason why it goes to the family immediately is because they want their money. They don't want the person. They just want money. They don't care about the person. Also, they want to keep the person alive because the person alive is worth a lot more than dead. And they don't want to be possibly prosecuted for murder if the person dies. These people are the scum of the earth. They don't care about anyone. They just want their money. Here's another thing. They didn't take her essential medication with them when they took her.
We know she is in need of medication, daily medication. And we also know that this is day 4 or 5 and still we don't know that she's getting her medication. That could in itself prove fatal.
You're kidnapping someone for ransom and you know they need to survive. Don't you think you may want to take the medication that's required for them to survive?
Nancy, a white female, 84 years of age, 5'2", medium build, private blue, living after 2,200 hours as of yesterday. Nancy has high blood pressure, pacemaker, and cardiac issues.
This was a kidnap ransom and they were more experienced. What they would do is actually ask Nancy, what medications do you absolutely need? It sounds a little odd to ask, but for an elderly person, they're naturally going to be on several medications.
And then they give a description of something that Savannah's mother was wearing at the time of the abduction and a damaged item in the house.
Where they mentioned the Apple Watch and the floodlight. And that was what really put my antenna up, and we immediately called the sheriff.
The ransom note did mention some things that maybe only someone there inside the house would know. But then again, there was a lot that was reported through the media. So it is kind of possible that maybe they kind of knew, the placement of the Apple Watch and I think a floodlight that was also present in the house. So if it is just those general things that basically anyone would know from just watching the media coverage, then it doesn't really say, of course, that they absolutely are the kidnappers and those ransom notes are actually from the kidnapper. Another interesting piece of evidence that's not really mentioned that would be a piece of evidence is if that front door was locked when the family arrived there that morning. Because what do you think that would possibly say about what occurred that early morning? If that front door was locked when the family got there, that says a lot because it's kind of like, who would possibly lock that front door to leave when you're kidnapping somebody? You're not focused on locking that front door.
Blood on the porch, that was one we did. It came back to Nancy.
And the fact that drops of blood were found at Nancy's front door and that there were numerous drops of blood by the front door and then got less and less as you moved away from the front door, guess towards the road. What do you think that indicates? That indicates that there was a pause of movement for whatever reason at the front door. But it appears there was some kind of resistance or struggle as they were trying to exit Nancy out of the house. Whether that was Nancy trying to hold on to the door and the door frame to not exit the house because she knows as soon as she exits the house, it's going to be really a bad situation. It's possible something like that occurred.
Investigators say they can't even find the camera. Only the mount is left behind.
When Nancy was dropped off by her family, how did she enter the house?
The Pima County Sheriff tells us Nancy was dropped off by a family member after dinner around 9:45 last Saturday.
Yes, it appears the way Nancy enters and exits her house is through the garage and not the front door. People, of course, have a preference of whether they're going to enter and exit their house through the garage or a front door or maybe even a side door of their house, right? It's just a preference. However, the fact that there's blood outside the front door of her house indicates somehow, some way, by someone, she was exited forcibly outside of her house.
On behalf of our family, we want to thank all of you for the prayers
A couple of days ago, the Guthrie family made a ransom response video and posted it on Suzanne Guthrie's Instagram page.
FBI Special Agent in charge Heath Yankee says he's advising Savannah Guthrie and her siblings Annie and Cameron how to move forward, but any action taken on a ransom is a family decision.
However, even though the FBI was likely involved in the writing of this letter that they read on camera, they made a big mistake right here. Can you catch it?
We live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her.
Yes, they asked the kidnappers for proof of life. However, they didn't specify what that exactly meant and gave them an exact order of what that meant to them. You typically don't want to give the kidnapper any type of discretion or power in any of this. Here's why. Because to them, proof of life may be sad and disgusting, but that might be proof of life to them. And you don't want that to happen to Nancy. What should have been said instead is, we need proof of life. The way we're going to do that is you contact us and we will give you a question to ask Nancy that only Nancy would possibly know. And then at that point, if she answers correctly, that will be the proof of life we need to continue our negotiation.
We want to hear from you, and we are ready to listen. Please reach out to us.
The letter says you will have no way of contacting me. This is the only contact. So that's why they're pleading for proof of life. That's why they are begging, because they have no idea how to get in touch with this person.
If you don't specify what proof of life actually is, you're leaving it up to really bad people, really disgusting people, to decide and tell you what proof of life actually is. And I can sadly almost guarantee you that you're not going to like what proof of life actually is to those types of people. You never leave it up to the perpetrator to decide big things like that, because they're the ones who did something terrible to your loved one. Why are you going to trust them to decide what proof of life is, or anything big in this case? It's so psychologically important to keep them small so that they subconsciously feel like they're playing your game instead of feeling like they're playing their own game where anything's possible and they can do anything and harm the person and create fear for the family so that they eventually relent. Before, I was leaning more towards it could be a kidnap murder, but now it seems possible that it's actually a kidnap ransom. As sad as it is that maybe it is a kidnap ransom, there is still the possibility that Nancy Guthrie is alive. However, there's many things that the family can say and do which would be much more productive and helpful to their cause when they're conversing with the kidnappers, and I'll probably make that in a future video.
In a related development, California police arrested a man accused of sending bogus Bitcoin-related texts to the Guthrie family Wednesday. Court documents say Derek Colella admitted using an internet-based number just to see if the family would respond.
My thoughts and prayers are with Nancy Guthrie, the Guthrie family, during this difficult time. Now in the comments, what do you think apparently sadly happened to Nancy Guthrie? Let everyone know in the comments below. Subscribe for more. And if you want exclusive content and channel perks, hit that join button now below, because your support makes all of this possible. It's so sad, and I'm always available to law enforcement or families during this time. See you next time.